Hello and welcome to the Blitz podcast. We're talking about defense analysis. I'm Big Italy 42. He is Spencer Limbach at Spencer_JL on Twitter. And this is your article here. You wrote up the guys that, or I guess the units that you like for this week. Your favorite ones down to the top to bottom. So we'll start here at the top. St. Louis Rams at the Washington Redskins. Got them as an elite play. $4,900 on FanDuel, $3,100 on DraftKings. And facing a Washington team that scored only 10 points in week one. I mean, Alfred Morris did a good job on the ground, but aside from that, especially with Deshaun Jackson out for at least 3 to 4, 5 weeks, I've said it doesn't matter much this week other than him just being out. So really no playmakers on this offense. You can kind of key on the running game and dare Kirk Cousins to try to beat you deep.
Yeah, and the Rams, they have one of the best run defenses in the league anyway, so I'm expecting the Redskins to do really little to nothing on the ground and make Kirk Cousins beat him with his arm, which is the recipe for turnovers, really, because no one has turned the ball over more over the past 2 seasons than Kirk Cousins. So, I just feel that all of that's just really going to feed into itself, and the Rams are going to have a pretty good defensive week. Even though they are on the road, and you usually like to look at some of your elite plays at home, but I think this is an exception to that rule, and the Rams are definitely warrant consideration on both sites, but on DraftKings for $3,100 especially is where I want to key on them.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you there. I think that's a great spot for them. Next up, a popular pick from week one, Miami Dolphins at the Jacksonville Jaguars. We saw really all that they did was they had a punt return touchdown, had a couple picks against that same Washington team we were mentioning earlier, and they paid off well in every format. Now facing off against the Jacksonville team that did a whole lot of nothing in week one, and we don't really expect to do a whole lot more in week two in a matchup against the Miami defense as a whole. You know, the defensive line is it's really hyped. It's supposed to be one of the best in football, if not the best. Didn't look great this past week, especially the run defense, but you don't expect a huge lot of volume or really a lot of success for TJ Yeldon this one anyway.
Yeah, and I'm really expecting the Dolphins to have a high ownership percentage just because they were so good last week, and they're facing Jacksonville, which is a notoriously good matchup. I mean, if you remember back last season, they were just it seems like it didn't matter what caliber of defense they played. They just gave up fantasy points to the opposing defense. And Blake Bortles, week one, he was at it again, threw a pick six against Carolina. So you really like the way the Dolphins match up in this one. And I'm going to have to check the scoring on FanDuel. I don't know if kicking an opponent's helmet off is worth points, but if it is, you'd like to have Ndamukong Suh in your corner for the Dolphins. So, yeah, maybe that's a bonus. I don't know. I'll have to check the scoring. But either way, Jacksonville, yeah, I mean, you can pick pretty much anyone against them, let alone an above-average defense like Miami. So I think they're going to be popular and for good reason.
Yeah, as long as Suh gets a tackle for loss or a sack prior to kicking someone or ripping their helmet off, I think you do get at least 1 point for it. So,
yeah, there you go.
Value plays here. You got the New Orleans Saints against Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I don't know if you watched this game, but if you missed the first 5 minutes, you missed all the action because Marcus Mariota and Tennessee jumped all over the Buccaneers. They never recovered. Jameis Winston threw a touchdown pass on his first play ever. Unfortunately, it was to the other team, and he just looked awful. Press conference, he gave the whole story we've seen a million times with the young quarterback. We're a different team, blah, 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 but this does not look like a different team at all.
Yeah, I mean, if you saw Jameis Winston in college, he really got away with a lot of that stuff, just hanging around in the pocket, not making quick decisions. And it's really going to come back to bite him here in the NFL, especially these first few games as he gets adjusted to the different level. So that's why I like the Saints this week. It's more of who they're playing than a full endorsement of that defense. As we know with their scheme over the past few years, they're very opportunistic, like to go for the interceptions. And Jameis Winston playing his first road game there in the Superdome, you just have to like the way it really lines up for the Saints, and they're pretty cheap. $4,500 on FanDuel is a little bit cheaper than those elite plays, so I don't mind them if you're looking to save, $400, $500 there. They could get a couple picks and look for a pick six maybe too.
Yeah, I mean, if you watched every game, which I know you and I and pretty much everyone else around here did, that might have been the worst offense that we saw in Week 1, top to bottom. So it
And
doesn't
they got
surprise me.
away with a lot of garbage stats too towards the second half, where they broken tackles and went for like 50 yards touchdowns with their tight end Safari and Jenkins. So yeah, the box score it really even wasn't as close as it indicated. So Tampa was pretty horrible all day.
Really sad that game that made it look closer than it was, because I mean I felt bad for them, and I mean I don't care either way in that game. I didn't have a whole lot of shares of either side, but I mean you feel bad for NFL players that are that bad, but you realize how much they're getting paid, and all of a sudden you don't care anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
Next up, the Cincinnati Bengals, my hometown team, against the San Diego Chargers. I'll let you take the wheel on this one, because I'm excited about the Bengals defense.
Yeah, I mean they're a pretty good defense in general to begin with. I mean I'd say rank them in the top 10 pretty easily in most lists. So I mean they're a solid defense. They're at home, and you got San Diego here traveling cross country. If you watched that game with San Diego and Detroit last week, Phillip Rivers was just horrible in the first half. I mean he had no touch on his passes. It looks like he was indecisive. Really didn't know what he was doing. Had no chemistry with his wide receivers. So I mean, we've seen it before with Phillip Rivers. He's Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, week to week. And him playing on the road, cross-country, in Cincinnati, against a good defense, I think it's going to be the latter this time around. And, if he gets off to another slow start, that could just compound, and it could be a miserable outing. So I like Cincinnati. I think they're going to be a little bit overlooked just because there are better options on the surface, like teams playing Jacksonville, Miami playing Jacksonville, and the Rams playing Washington for similar salary. So I think the Bengals are kind of sneaky, and they have a similar projection as those two teams.
Yeah, and it seems like this defense is veteran enough to realize that when you're getting gashed by Keenan Allen, you just take Keenan Allen out of the game as much as you can and let everyone else beat you, because there's not a whole lot of other weapons. I mean, Danny Woodhead, Stevie Johnson, yes, but those are fringe NFL players as is. I mean,
Hey, tell the Lions that strategy, because it seemed to elude them on Sunday.
There's no telling the Lions anything. They can find new creative ways to lose games, and my wife's a Lions fan. We were watching that game the whole time knowing they were going to lose. We just didn't know how it was going to happen. So that's what they do. No surprises there. Last up, you have the Baltimore Ravens at the Oakland Raiders. We saw the Oakland Raiders last week. They scored 2 touchdowns, but only after they were already down by 33 points. This offense looked terrible. Derek Carr, injured now. Don't really know who's going to be in this one. I don't think Carr has officially been listed out. I think he's questionable, if I'm not mistaken. But I don't think it matters a whole lot. Obviously, Matt McGloin, on the surface, looks like he had a decent game. But, I mean, really, you're going against essentially a prevent defense at that point, down by 5 touchdowns. And he got a couple scores, but he threw a pick on, I think it was the second pass that he threw. So, I mean, this team is just not in a good spot. I mean, this is a Baltimore team that shut down Peyton Manning in that explosive offense last week. And good luck, Amari Cooper and company, because they're not going to have a lot of success this week.
Yeah, and I actually have them written up as a GPP play. I think they probably rank in the elite category, and they will be a little more popular than that. But that's where they fit in the column. That's where they got the mention. So just take note of that. But yeah, you basically said it. They shut down Peyton Manning on the road last week. Now they have a much easier matchup against, 2 inexperienced quarterbacks. One of them very inexperienced, only played like 3 quarters. Yeah. So you have to feel good regardless about that. And Oakland, I think they're going to be pretty frequent target of this column all season long, no matter who their quarterback is. So, this isn't the last we'll see of them. Yeah,
and I think this is a great call in GPPs, because people will see things like Terrell Suggs being out for the season now and overreact. But, I mean, this is a well-coached group. There's a perennial top 10 defense, so I'm not worried about them in this matchup. I feel like most defenses would be having success here, especially them. So,
yep.
All right, that's going to wrap things up. Find us on Twitter at DF Cafe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Lots of great content for NFL, MLB, and everything else at dailyfantasycafe.com.